Pro-imperialism is not just being in favor of imperialism, it is being in favor of political strategies which lead to imperialism. And having an appeasement approach towards Russia is a pro-imperialist strategy. You are letting Russia just do it. Who cares if they do imperialism? I do! Let's take a look at why I'm trending. So I had a conversation with Kyle Kulinski a couple of days ago where we talked about our different perspectives on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Kyle's position was essentially anti-interventionist. He believed that NATO should be retracted back to its post-Cold War borders and that Russia's invasion of Ukraine would be a bad thing, but, you know, maybe we could prevent them from doing that more in the future by doing what they wanted. It was appeasement. I'm sorry, I love Kyle, but he was talking about appeasement here. Here we can find the clip. Don't think there's any amount of context that would make this not sociopathic. Is that a challenge? Let's find out. Actual geopolitical threats will change anything. I feel like the only thing we can do at this point is starve Russia out. We're wealthier than them by metrics. I mean, ally with all the countries in their periphery, sanction their leaders, cripple their economy, wait for them to bleed out, and then when they're ready to play ball, they can be a nice, compliant country.
I mean, but there's a lot of civilians that get hurt in that scenario.
In eastern Ukraine as well, yeah. But if they're going to be like that... If we do the
sanctions on Russia, is what I'm saying, that would hurt a lot of civilians.
Yeah, I know. Not as much as there's missile strikes would hurt eastern Ukrainians, right? Again, keep in mind, this isn't out of spite. If actual... Got the mid-sentence cut off there. Very good. Anyway, I like how the mid-sentence cut off prevents the context from making it evident that it would be sort of an anti-war thing. But anyway, brilliant clip right there. It's so tight, Twitter has to give the correct context for what you're saying. Love my Twitter overlords. Love my CAA contacts. The problem with this clip is that everything in it is objectively correct, and so am I. And it needs no context because everything that I say is correct. Simple as that, really. No, people are quite mad for no reason. So the issue here is that geopolitics is really tough. You know what I mean? One of the reasons why I like domestic sociological stuff is because sometimes there are empirical answers because people behave predictably as groups given certain conditions. So, for example, if I make statements about how reducing income inequality would lead to less crime, or if I talk about how urban renewal or city revitalization can do this or that, I'm talking about like a really consistent through line that you can find basically objective evidence to prove. Sociology is not as much of a soft science as people like to say. You can figure out a lot. The problem with geopolitics is that it's a whole other ball game. You know, you can sincerely believe the best way to prevent a bad thing from happening is to do this thing, but then it turns out that like just the other thing was the right thing. Like, oops, you know? There's so much information you're not privy to because a lot of it is literally an issue of national security. So we as civilians are just like sitting here like dumb fish, like just taking guesses, you know? It can make it really, really, really difficult to fully understand the matter at hand. But when it comes to this particular situation, let me remind you all of the circumstances, right? Shall we? So the issue at hand here is that Russia seems to be gearing up to, though they're taking their sweet time, maybe they will pull back, seems to be gearing up to invade Ukraine, which would be bad. The reason they say they're invading Ukraine is because it's a prompt in response to NATO expansionism, and they take an issue with NATO expansionism because NATO is basically an anti-Russia defensive alliance that's been expanding eastward through previously Soviet Union-controlled territories. And if they were to take control of Ukraine, they would literally share a border with Russia, which Russia doesn't want because A, that means weakening geopolitical control over their, periphery. And B, it means these are countries they can't fuck with as much. As you've probably seen in Georgia or, the Czech Republic back in the early 2000s? Yeah. And Crimea, Russia sometimes likes to go what I like to call a gamer mode on their neighbors. Chechnya, thank you. They like to go gamer mode on their neighbors. It's very difficult to do that if there are NATO troops in that area, because if there are NATO troops there and you go gamer mode, World War III starts. So, yeah. They want to prevent NATO from moving in, and posturing and invasion are tools on the table for engaging in that behavior. Also, as people in my subreddit have pointed out, there are strategic resources such as natural gas in East Ukraine that Russia wants its hands on because having control of that would deny the West the ability to leverage it against them. There are a ton of complicated factors here, but the gist of it is, it seems like Russia is just going to keep bullying their neighbors unless those neighbors are protected in some way. Ukraine wants NATO involvement for the most part because NATO involvement theoretically would protect them, and Ukraine can't protect itself against Russia elsewise because Ukraine doesn't have nuclear weapons and NATO members do. The problem that we arrive at here is that there's not really an easy solution. I actually think the solution that Biden has adhered to thus far has probably been the correct one, that we should supply armaments to Ukraine, but not send troops to Ukraine directly because that would dramatically increase the likelihood of nuclear war. You guys understand what I'm talking about? I think that's a fine response. But for long-term solutions, should Russia just be allowed to invade Ukraine? Most people will agree that's a bad thing, but what do we do to stop it? What do we do to prevent it? Or, at the very least, what do we do in response to a Ukrainian invasion if it actually takes place? And here's the issue, folks. I have scrolled through a lot of Twitter posts criticizing me. They don't have another solution. They do not. I am not joking. I sincerely want somebody to give me the big brain, like, okay, so what's on the table? Okay, well, we could invade Russia. Let's not do that. Please, let's not do that. That would be the end of all life on Earth. They have nukes. We have nukes. We can't invade Russia. Let's not do that, okay? So what can we do? Well, we can arm Ukraine, which we're doing right now, but they can still invade. If we pull NATO back, that just means more territory for them to invade, and NATO's not going to pull back anyway. So what? What? Do they just get to do whatever? And it's that phony isolationism, that pseudo-appeasement strategy that I see so frequently on the left. That their only understanding of imperialism is that it's the thing the West does, and that any involvement whatsoever in another nation's affairs is bad. I genuinely am glad that this strain of leftism was not super predominant back during World War II, because as I understand it, most American leftists were pretty on board with bashing the fash back then, but I swear to God, a lot of these folks today would be like, this is Europe's problem, and, go fuck yourself, all right? Why deny American GIs the life-improving opportunity to shoot Nazis? Anyway, I see so many people who are like really, really angry at what I've said in that Twitter clip, but they don't seem to have a better solution. They criticize sanctions, and don't get me wrong, sanctions suck, okay? I want to be clear, by the way, sanctions are garbage. But if you want to prevent Russia from engaging in this constant military expansionism, and we can't invade for a number of reasons, do we do literally nothing? Because to me, that is a pro-imperialist sentiment. Pro-imperialism is not just being in favor of imperialism, it is being in favor of political strategies which lead to imperialism. And having an appeasement approach towards Russia is a pro-imperialist strategy. You are letting Russia just do it. Who cares if they do imperialism? I do. Because it's bad when bad things happen. What do you mean, who cares if they do? Listen, nationalism and socialism are antithetical. If you're only concerned with what's going on in your borders, you're not concerned with the international proletariat. And as far as I'm concerned, it's international proletariat or bust, okay? There are proletarians in Ukraine. There are proletarians in Estonia. There are proletarians in Russia. It's international proletariat. They're everywhere, actually. That's how it works, sort of. Yeah, pretty much every body of land outside of Epstein's Island has the proletariat on it. And They should be supported. And unfortunately, contrary to the expectations apparently of a lot of leftists, Russia is no closer to socialism than America is. In fact, they're farther away from it. All right? I'll stake my ground on this. Wherever Russia and America are on the great staircase to socialism, they're behind us, which is impressive because we're not exactly close to it ourselves, but they are behind us. Okay? So this isn't some sort of like, critical support issue. It's an imperialist power and another imperialist power. The difference being that at the moment, to my knowledge, America is not intending to annex any neighboring countries. We don't have any aim to invade Mexico. If we do, this is a surprise to me. I was not made aware of this fact. We should not do that. If this thing is to go through, I don't want it. It's bad. I don't want it. So with that caveat taken into account, I've said sanctions could be a solution. I'm going to be real with you guys. I don't think sanctions are a great solution. I just think they're like a little bit better than doing nothing. So the worst types of sanctions you can do are just like massive trade blockades that, you try to starve out a country. But this is bad for a couple of reasons. First of all, killing innocent people is bad. This is a hot take here on the Vaush stream. It's not good when that happens. We shouldn't do that. Should be prevented when possible. Secondly, logistically, I think Russia is self-sustaining enough that they could manage. They export grain, don't they? I mean, even if you were to go like full wasteland style and just like fuck them, whatever, like I think they could still take care of themselves. You'd make life miserable for them, don't get me wrong, but like you would be making life miserable for Russians without even achieving the potential upside. So like that's just a lose-lose. It's just lose-lose-lose. It's not good. There are other possible solutions, of course. You could try to sanction their leaders, freeze assets from Russian oligarchs in America. This can be done. We've done this to other banks and people before. There are Russian oligarchs all over the world. Many of them do business in America. They own stuff in America. Now they don't. Yoink. Sorry. Guys, we're seizing the means of production, just only from people with Russian citizenship. How based is that? Whatever. Maybe we'll get the rest of the citizenships done next. That seems like a better solution to me. The main reason being because Russia's not really a democracy, not really. So the misery of the Russian people probably isn't going to change the behavior of the Russian government that much. Sean's video on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and our decision to bomb them during World War II is really instructive on this. How the Japanese high command really didn't give a shit about their peasants suffering, like, at all. And Sean points out one of the reasons why the bombs didn't immediately bring a close to the war is because the bombs only bombed poor people. Do you think the Emperor of Japan cares that much? Do you think the High Council cares that much? These people are... The Japanese High Command were aristocrats beyond aristocracy. They existed on a social strata incomparable to what we have in America today, explicitly at least. They did not care. They sat next to the emperor. They didn't care. And for that reason, the suffering of the people just doesn't affect the leadership that much. A follow-through question. Do you think Putin gives much of a shit if his people are starving? Will Putin starve? Probably not. You can sanction Russia as much as you want, but Putin will continue to eat whatever food Putin asks his chefs for. Not going to affect him at all, not personally. However, outside of general instability, there is a better way. Because Russia's government is simplifying somewhat, largely controlled in a kind of de facto oligarchy, as the state assets during the Soviet Union were carved up into different levies of private ownership, and all of a sudden Russia just had a bunch of billionaires that were carving up bits of what remained of the USSR, which is, by the way, fantastic. If these people are miserable, Putin will hear about it. If, Ivan or, Vladovsky, goes back to the Kremlin and starts bitching about how his penthouse loft in Manhattan got repoed, because America has frozen the assets of all Russian nationals abroad. Well, suddenly we now have, I think, a slightly more impactful sanction, in spite of it affecting 1,000th, 100,000th, a millionth of the people. I think that the outcomes could potentially be better. You know, this could also lead to World War III, lol. Russia could lead to World War III. That's the issue. You can back NATO off if you want, give Russia 50 years, and they're just going to keep reconquering all the territory up through the Warsaw Pact until Russia is right next to Germany, and then we're having the same conversation 50 years from now. That's why things need to be stopped now. I've said this before about compliance, okay? And I'll say this again because nobody made it to the end of the 2-hour video from before, all right? The problem with Russia is that the systems that keep big countries from nuking each other aren't working for Russia. Do you know why America doesn't invade England, or England Germany, or France Germany, or Spain, or whatever else? Or why America is never going to have a ground war with China? The reason is because of trade codependence. Obviously nukes help, but trade codependence is the big one. The issue is, if Biden could Thanos snap China out of existence with no threat of retaliation, the American economy would implode. You realize that, right? There is no way to engage in warfare with China without crippling our domestic economy. The problem with Russia is that Russia is an oligarchy with a generally low GDP per capita, at least relative to other European nations, and a lot of Russians consider themselves Europeans, so we'll throw them in there. And additionally, Russia has the military and nuclear power of a superpower, the desire to expand like an old-time imperialist war machine pre-World War II, but they don't have the economic codependence that would allow us to constrain their behavior. That's the issue with this whole sanction business. Here in America, the threat of a... Guys, do you remember the fucking oil crisis in the 70s? All you have to do to bring America to its knees is cut off our oil supply just a little bit. All it takes is just a little squeeze and America falls apart. Economic codependence, geopolitics, that's the name of the game. Russia doesn't have those ties with the West, and for that reason, they don't have the same economic incentives to not invade neighboring countries. The goal would be to have the USSR fall in line with every other country on Earth, including United States. Mutual codependence. Weakness. I want nation states to be weak. I want the economic consequences of a deeply intertwined international economy. Did I say USSR, Russia? A deeply intertwined international economy to be so significant that any warfare between any nations leads to impending economic catastrophe, and therefore the war doesn't happen. You guys understand? Codependence is strength. Codependence is peace. Economic dependence is peace. Weakness is peace. There's a reason why nowadays the great American empire wastes their time sending troops into countries like Afghanistan and Iraq, countries that don't exactly have thriving networks of trade codependence. But you trust me, okay? You build Iraq up, give it the same economy, the same export-import ratio of a fucking European social democracy, America would never touch it. Would never touch it. You know why? Because if we did touch it, all of a sudden, palm oil for hippies on the West Coast, they don't make palm oil in Iraq. Why am I saying that? What do they make in Iraq? I don't know. Whatever they make in Iraq would double in price, triple in price, quadruple in price here in the States. And oil, sure, oil, obviously. Iraq, oil, why didn't I think of that? Oil prices would skyrocket, and people would be very angry. Do you think any U.S. president is going to invade Iraq if doing so would lead to a cutoff to their sophisticated oil trade export network, therefore leading to oil prices tripling in the States? Do you think another president wants to be around for another gas crisis? No president would do this. It would be insane. That's what I'm talking about, guys. What about Iran? Well, Iran's much more developed than Iraq at the moment, but Iran runs in different geopolitical groups, runs in different trade groups. This is why, as long as we live in a capitalist economy, we want to make sure that the capitalist investment is distributed evenly. Asymmetrical capital distribution leads not only to global income inequality, which is bad enough, but it also leads to different trade blocs engaging in military antagonism with each other, you know? You can fix that with proper codependence. Capital distributed evenly across countries, you mean? Oh, good luck getting that under capitalism. I just mean, like, every country should be invested in every other country. You guys understand? Americans should want Russia to not invade Ukraine because Ukraine, like everything, all the prices worldwide would rise. Like, Russia shouldn't want Russia to invade Ukraine because it would mean that their shit goes up as well. This is the codependence that I'm talking about. When I talk about Russia falling in line, that's what I mean. Not to the US, because the US is as much a slave of these processes as anyone else, okay? Hey guys, trust me, all right? The United States may be strong, but the United States is very codependent economically. We have a fragile economy, as COVID should have taught anyone who didn't believe that before. And it would not take much antagonism between us and a codependent trade partner to create serious issues. Anyway, that's the context here. If you want, you can scroll through all the people who are mad at me on Twitter. But again, I want to like repeat to you guys, as funny as all the memes are, like, these people are pro-imperialism. If your only position on an imperialist country invading their neighbors is don't say anything about it, don't have any consequences, don't do anything, don't fight back, don't try anything, you are enabling and abetting the imperialism. You don't have to say that something is good in order for you to be in favor of it, because being in favor of something only means you prefer it to the alternative. You guys understand? That's the context. So once again, I am canceled on Twitter for being objectively right about everything that I believe, say, do, hear, taste, tell, smell, touch. But that's life. That's life. Oh, apparently I might actually have a potential to debate a Jacobin author on this particular subject. I'll happily talk to anyone. Bring to me the smartest anti-imperialist, isolationist, anti-interventionist, whatever they want to call themselves, lefties. I want to talk with them, okay? I want, like, I invite you to challenge me on this particular issue, because I just don't want to have, I can't keep doing this thing where this thing keeps happening. I just keep seeing this, like, the same thing happening over and over again, where I'm like, hey, imperialism is bad, and we need to do something to stop Russia. Like, I don't know, maybe sanctioning their leaders. And people are like, what? Sanctioning their leaders? Don't you know sanctions hurt people? And then I'm like, well, yeah, I know they do, but, like, the invasion of Ukraine would hurt people too. And they're like, who gives a fuck about Ukraine? Who gives a shit about... I've seen people say, they're like, who gives... Not our problem. All right, well, you know what? If Ukraine's citizens aren't my problem, you know whose else aren't? Okay? Fucking Russia's, all right? I have no idea how you can logically parse out the belief that you shouldn't care about Ukraine's citizens, but you should be hand-wringing over what sanctions would do to Russian citizens, okay? Sure, whatever. Well, in this case, Russia's the one doing the thing, not us. Who the f cares? I'm not the US government. I'm not the fucking Russian government either, okay? In either case, something's happening. These people are such fucking cowards, dude. Unwilling to take responsibility for the difficulties associated with trying to make the world better. They sit at home and do nothing. This is what I call Chapo syndrome. Ever since Bernie dropped out of the primaries, they went from, cynical but otherwise enthusiastic affirmation of left-leaning political stuff to, look at us, we're so much more cynical and so much above it all than, like, everyone else who cares. Oh my god, wow, people are trying, wow, that's so cringe. Cynically commenting on the world as it falls apart. They let Russian troops butcher and innocent men, women, and children. They're in favor of it. In fact, I think we can all agree, without hyperbole, everyone who disagrees with me on this actively wants Russian troops to butcher and Ukrainian civilians. It's the only logical follow-through. They want it. If I want the negative consequences of my belief system, that is to say, they're saying I want Russian civilians to starve as a product of sanctions, then they want the outcome of their system, which is allowing Russia to just invade Ukraine with no consequences, in which case, there you go. But they literally do. Well, should we liberate them like we did for Iraq? What? I do love it when people on the left like demonstrate how little they know about geopolitics by trying to draw any comparison between this and Iraq. Like, comparing this situation to Iraq really just indicates that you think, like, all countries are the same and all things are this would be like you see it, like, a dude a chick in, like, an alleyway or something, and, like, your friend rushes forward to, like, punch them, and you, like, pull him back, and you're like, wait, dude, remember the last time you punched someone? And it was when they were 6 years old, and they, like, hit a teacher in the thigh because they were mad, and they got sent to the principal's office. Like, dude, remember the last time you hit someone? You can't do that. Like, doesn't work. Dude, violence is bad. Like, that's the level that you're operating on right now, okay? You're on the square block, square hole level of geopolitics.